Pre-Calc. It's problem 10-17. It's part of your lecture for 10.1.2. We were asked to derive the equation of an ellipse. And we're given this diagram that looks kind of like an ellipse, and it's all labeled. Okay, and so I have a picture of the diagram. Here's a picture of the diagram right here. So letter A says, write an expression for the sum of the distances from your point P to each of the pins. Okay, so I got the distance. I actually got out the distance formula because the distance, like from the pins, is just these dotted lines here. Okay, so we can just use these ordered pairs. And so I got x minus c squared plus y squared. Or sorry, x minus negative c squared. So like x minus negative c, because see it's like x2 minus x1, and then y2 minus y1, and then so that's where this came from, and then x2 minus x1, and we do it again over here. So x2 minus x1, so it's going to be x minus c, and then y minus 0. Okay, and then letter B says the graph is, letter B says the length of the dotted line that represents your string is the sum of the distances from any point on the ellipse to the foci. Using the diagram, what's the length of your string? So you can't, like the length of your string is just this dotted line plus this other dotted line. But if you use the diagram, you can move the string around, and you'll notice that the string is spanning, like if that's the origin and this is A and this is negative A, then all the way across would be 2A. And our string, even though there's that gap right there, it's kind of doubled over right here, which makes up for the gap right there. So the length of our string is actually 2A. So that's what we put there. And then letter C says use the definition of an ellipse with your expression from part A to create an equation for the ellipse. So we know that the distance of that one, dotted line plus the distance of the other one is equal to 2A. So we set it like this, and then letter D, that's where things start getting really fun. Let's see if I can cover this thing up. So letter D, it wants you to work with your team to rewrite your equation from part C without any square roots. Your final equation should have x and y on the same side of the equation. So I've probably done this problem, this is probably about my third or fourth time doing the problem. So, because I did it the hardest way possible. So what you want to do is just subtract one of these roots on both sides of the equation, so you can get one, so you can isolate one of these radicals, and then just square both sides. Oh, I didn't show that I squared it. Okay, and then when I square this, it undoes the squaring, so I just end up with whatever was in the radicand there. See? And then here, when you square, this is just a binomial. So it's going to be this squared, and then this last term will be, this last term will be this squared, and then the middle term will be the first term times the last term times 2. So that's where this part came from. It's because of if you don't understand what I just said, write the box. write 2a and negative square root blah, 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 and then 2a and negative square root blah, blah, blah. And when you multiply the square roots, you're just going to end up with what's inside. But then you're going to get 2 of them right here. So work this out. Put the stuff inside there when you do it. Work this out the long way if you don't understand the squaring pattern. So basically, you take the first thing, square it, then you take the first thing times the second thing times 2, and then you take the second thing squared, and there's that. Okay, and then I think we're going to try to get, we want to get this radical by itself now, and get everything else to go away so that we can square both sides again. So, yeah, it's ugly. So what we should, I almost canceled these out, but that's a plus and that's a minus, so don't do that. So I squared this out. It's the first thing squared, and then the first thing times the second thing times 2, and then the second thing squared. And then this y squared just came down, and so I wrote that all out, those 4 terms. And then there's my 4a, and then wrote this down. I squared this out, so that would be x squared, and then x times negative c times 2, negative 2xc, and then c squared. But then I realized that I can just, look, I had x squareds on both sides, so I just wrote a line through them and just canceled them out. I got c squareds on both sides, and I got y squareds on both sides. And then I realized I had a 2xc over here and a negative 2xc over here. So I'm adding 2xc to both sides of the equal sign. And so then that leaves me with just this is 4xc, everything else canceled out. And then this comes down, all that stuff's gone. So that makes me feel better. And it said I needed to have, oh, well, first before I need to get the x and y on the same side, I have to get rid of this radical. So I think we'll just subtract the 4a squared. Okay, and then I subtracted the 4a squared, and then I was going to go ahead and square, but I saw that I could just divide by negative 4 everywhere, and that would keep me from getting like a 16 or something when I square this out. So I just divided everything by negative 4. And then, so that gives me xc minus a squared. But I didn't want it to be xc minus, oh wait, that gives me negative xc plus a squared. So I wanted to rearrange it and let it be a squared minus xc instead of negative xc plus a squared. Now I'm squaring both sides. I know I have that a there, but that's okay. It'll just get squared. So square both sides. So again, we're going to use that pattern. You take this, the first thing, and square it. So that gives you the a to the 4th. And then the first thing times the second thing times 2. So negative 2a squared xc, because that times that. And then the last thing squared gives me x squared c squared. Okay, and then over here, squaring the a gives me a squared, and then squaring this radical just makes the radical leave, and I've got this mess. Well, this I'm going to probably square it out. Yep. So now we're going to go ahead and square this part out. So the first thing squared, and then the first thing times the second thing times 2, and then the second thing squared, and then there's my y squared. And then I distributed my a squared to everything. I did that because I knew I had to get all the x's and y's on the left-hand side, or, well, whatever, on the same side of the equal sign as each other. Anyway, after I did all this distributing, I found that these negative 2a squared xc's would cancel out, so that was nice. And then I looked at all my terms, And I know I want all the x's and y's on one side and all the ones that don't have x's and y's on the other side, because it told me to do that in letter, I don't know, letter D, I think. So what do? Oh, I got rid of this because I only want x's and y's on the left-hand side. So I got rid of a to the fourth on both sides, subtracted. Oh, and here's a new, I had to start a new sheet of paper. Okay, so if I subtracted a to the fourth, then all I really have left to bring down is just that, and there's my equal sign, and that came down, and that came down, and that came down, and then that's that a fourth that I subtracted on both sides. Okay, so I'm trying to get all my x's on one side and all my y's on the other side. So I see this one just came down, and then I see that this has an x squared in it, so I minused it, so that's why it's negative over here. And I didn't want to do too many steps all at once, so I just doing one or two steps at a time so I don't mess up. I see that now I have all my x's over here, but I want my y's over here too, so I'm going to minus the a squared y squared, so that just came over to the other side of the equal sign, and it left me these two terms. And then it said, hint, hint, you need to factor. And so I saw that these have the x squareds on them, and then this one is just the y squared one. And I know basically that my equation's going to end up having to look kind of like that in the end. So I factored the x squared out of these two. So these two made this. And then over here I factored the a squared out. And then it says, continue to rewrite your equation until it equals 1. Hence, you may need to factor. Okay, so I need it to equal 1 over here. So I'm going to divide everything by a squared, c squared minus a squared, like that. Because that'll make it equal 1 over there. So that equals 1. This one, the a squareds go away. And I have y squared. Kind of wish I didn't have that minus sign there. I have y squared over c squared minus a squared. And then here, these cancel out, and I have x squared over a squared. And then it asks me something. It says, so this is like what they asked me to do in letter E. And then in letter F, it says, write an equation. Write an equation relating A, B, and C. So I'm going to make a part 2 to this video and continue this because I think it's getting too long.